Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. All right, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the sleepy town of Middleton. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, for another week of the podcast. We've got a lot to get through today. We've got some quick hitters, the Miami Grand Prix recap, some MSI, and, of course, Magic the Gathering. But, Justin, good to see you. How have you been this week?
I've been all right, and boy, watching MSI, we've got the Miami Grand Prix, obviously Mercedes, one of the competing constructors. So, Aaron, to you, I'm going to open up the pod with a question. I had, this just kind of popped into my brain when I was watching the interview that they did with Gumayusi after the T1 series. You know, he's got all the sponsors. Left side shoulder, he's got the Mercedes sponsor, and it just got me thinking. So, do you think Faker and Hamilton have ever met, being both part of the Mercedes sports division, at some gala, some event, some kind of fundraising thing where they would both be there for Mercedes? And if this mythical meeting would have happened, would real recognize real, and would the spirit of competition be able to kind of cross those borders where Lewis would somebody would just be able to yo, Faker's he's got 3 world championships, and would Lewis be like, oh dude, tell me what you got going on? Do you think Mercedes has connected those two individuals?
So, do I think that has happened? Probably not.
Sure.
However, if it did happen and they were in the same, say they were taking some of their top athletes from all the different arenas that they have for a commercial and are going to have this big montage commercial of famous person from all these different things just zipping by in Mercedes. I think that, yeah, I think Lewis would, well, to be honest, I think Lewis would probably do his due diligence of knowing who the other people are. That just seems to be the kind of guy Lewis is, and so he would probably be like, oh, this guy is has the record for most world championships in League of Legends. That's definitely so. I think he would feel a kinship with Faker to some extent, but I don't know if they would chit chat and whatnot.
Sure, that might get tough with the whole Faker being Korean thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a thought that I had. Wanted to get your little 2 cents on it. But yeah, it's good to see you back for another week. Why don't you start us off with your Rose, Thorn, and Seed, Aaron?
Sounds good. So my rose this week was just getting to enjoy the wedding that Colleen and I went to over the weekend. It was her cousin getting married, and her cousin and his now wife were both with our group the night that Colleen and I started dating officially and everything. We were out at a EDM show with them, and that whole night they had been super friendly and welcoming, so I feel really good connection with them and everything, even though it's her family, and I just enjoyed getting to be there for the wedding and kind of see everything, and how they did things and how they kind of tailored it to themselves. They had a lot of EDM music at the reception and whatnot, but it was really cool. And Colleen's cousin's wife, she has for a while been calling us outlaws because we're outside people marrying into the family who are now going to be related. So as opposed to in-laws, we are outlaws. That is the dub term. So Colleen's cousin.
That an in-law? Isn't that what they are though?
Well, it would be more like Colleen's cousin's wife would be her cousin-in-law. But because Colleen's cousin would be my in-law, then his wife is like another step. So neither of us are like have any blood to this family, but we would be. So she calls that outlaws. And so it for a while, she like anytime I see her, she's like, "What's up, outlaw?" And I just think it's cool. And so so it was nice, like after having built these connections with them and everything, to also get to celebrate their wedding weekend with them. It was a lot of fun. So good times were had.
Outlaw.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. That's very cool.
I just think it sounds cool too. I mean,
yeah,
it's
sure.
like it's a much better way than saying, "Oh, like my fiance's cousin's wife." So I dig it. But my thorn for this week was just some of the annoyances that you have to deal with at work and whatnot. I had to clean up some
Yes.
animal urine in an elevator. I had to I just the things that I have to do. I had to take out. We found a mouse that had been caught in one of our snap traps in the like lunchroom area, so I had to deal with that and take it out. Our intern found it, and he just came to the office. He's like, where do we have like trash bags and gloves? And I was like, oh, I'll show you. I walked over and was like going to get the stuff for him. He's like, yeah, so it's because of that. And he like pointed to it, and I'm like, dude, you don't have to clean that up. I was like, I'll clean that up. This is like your fourth day here. Like,
Sure.
Like you're good, man. So it's the little things that just like, they just get you. Sure. Yeah, not the most fun stuff all the time at work, but otherwise it wasn't too bad of a work day. Everything went pretty smoothly outside of those couple things. But my seed is just kind of tying back to the wedding thing now. Colleen and I are going to officially be starting to plan, look at venues and whatnot, and start figuring things out, getting our ducks in a row. So I'm just looking towards that on the horizon. I don't know about looking forward to the wedding, the planning part, not quite as much, but it's, we'll get there. And, I'm sure it will get more fun the more things we have checked off the list. I know as a list guy over there, the crossing something off of it just tickles you. And everything, so I'm hoping that I get that same satisfaction out of like checking some of those things off the list as we get there.
Honestly, I don't think I believe in anything more than that. Is the crossing off of a task. I think that is the highest of ideals. Honestly,
I do it like I make checklists every day for myself for things to do at work, but I don't get any satisfaction out of crossing them off the list. I'm just like, thank God. It's more like relief. I'm like, thank God that's done.
Well, of course, and that's chemical, my friend.
So not as much satisfying for me to do. I'm just like, oh yes, one less thing. Well,
my take is maybe it doesn't have to get funner as you check things off. I imagine you can have some fun checking those things off. You know, like there's got to be fun in like
going and doing tastings for food and like like enjoying some of those like things along the way that you're like figuring. Yeah, that makes sense too.
Because it's a scenario in which a big wedding planner over here, done it many times. It's a scenario in which you get to like choose kind of exactly the thing that you guys want for a whole bunch of things. It
That's
feels
true.
like so many times in life you're compromising. You're like, we'll get this, but not this. We can do this, but not that. It's one of the few scenarios where you're like, yeah, yeah, we're going to get everything we want.
Oh yeah.
And that's like gotta be fun in the choosing and the picking and the exploration of it all.
Oh yeah.
My only caution is be careful which envelope glue you choose. You may end up killing one of yous.
Thank you. I appreciate that. For
Fair
anyone's
warning.
big Seinfeld reference right there.
Big Seinfeld
Love
guy
it.
over here.
Me too. I'm a fan. So that's true. I've got to be careful with that glue. Don't go for the discontinued envelopes.
Yep.
They may be discontinued for a reason. They're
Mm-hmm.
not just cheaper, George. Come on.
But in this scenario, George got exactly what he wanted.
Which is horrible.
Horrible. Oh God, what a show! But I'm happy. I'm happy to hear that the wedding went well. I'm happy to hear that you're looking forward to starting to do your own. That's exciting.
Yeah, but that's my rose thorn and seed for this week. But how about you tell the people what you've got going in your rose thorn and seed?
So my seed is an interesting one, being that we've got MSI going on. I've had the games up in the living room, and Sarah has been joining me for a bunch of the games. And there's interesting layers of conversation that have kind of opened up now that she like really has a, we'll say, base knowledge of the game at this point. She's seen a bunch of the champions, she's seen a bunch of the teams, she knows a bunch of the player names. When they're set on the cast, she's not necessarily confusing like, oh, did they just say a player name, did they just say a champion name. They're
Gotcha.
like, the data
Oh
has kind
yeah,
of
I guess
been
that
separated.
I wouldn't have thought of that being like a confusing thing because I
Oh yeah.
know all the champions.
Right, and like we have a sense that like, oh yeah, these five players have kind of wacky names. You hear them a little a bit, and it starts to differentiate. But no, she's like, is that a champion? Like, did they just say a champion or a player? It's like, oh no, that's like a player, or like, oh no, that's like a champion. So just parsing all of this stuff over a whole bunch of other games. Now she's coming into MSI, and we're having conversations of like talking about how junglers and mid laners can apply pressure in the early game using like good communication to know exactly where they are, where opponent is, and like being able to show her like, yeah, see how Chovy is like edging towards the top of mid lane, and she's like, oh yeah, I see that. Yeah, now see how like her jungler is able to, oh yeah, okay, like look at this like line of scrimmage. She's like, yeah, okay. And now she's like really starting to see kind of like the higher level plays, the higher level movements. Now we're explaining like what specific abilities do, what like to look out for, like, oh, like these are the combos that these champions are looking to do. Oh, you see that ability, like, oh, okay. And it just like it's all building. So we've had some like pretty interesting conversations, specifically during the Gen G game, like about what like we were kind of focusing on Chovy with the Ari pick. So it was just really fun to kind of highlight some of the more finer aspects of the game, to be fair. So I
Nice.
thought that was really cool, and is a seed because I think it'll just like build now that she like understands, she can enjoy it more.
Oh, that's awesome. It's
Yeah.
definitely like it's overwhelming initially to come in, especially this far into the game being out and everything. But that's awesome that you're able to like start discussing more like in depth topics, and that she's like
Mm-hmm.
able to follow along and like learn because you obviously have a lot of experience with League of Legends to be able to pass some tidbits here and there over. So that's cool that you guys are able to enjoy that together on like another level. But also,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a great like opportunity with the amount of games and everything going on for her to like start learning some of the more detailed parts of like you said, champion abilities and things like that, because you're seeing a lot of the same champions again and again, game after game. So it gives you that opportunity to really like commit them to memory a bit.
Yeah, big time. So yeah, I think I'm just like really looking forward to watching more MSI games with her. And then I'll do my rose so I can get out of my thorn very quickly. My rose here is the boys over at Crytek. They've got another quest line for us in Hunt Showdown. They always, like, as you do the quest lines, as you, like, knock off the challenges and whatever, you get gun skins, you get hunter skins, you get tool skins and stuff, and it just gives you easy it gives you an easy excuse to use like the different kind of guns, different kind of weapons, maybe play like off strategies that you don't usually. So me and Sarah have just been having a lot of fun with the hunt quest lines. The
Nice.
the hunter skin that they're releasing, he's a badass looking gentleman. He's got these like long braids. He's a scary looking dude. I'm not quite sure what his bio is, but hopefully once I unlock him, I'll be able to find out. So the hunt quest lines are really fun. And then my thorn, I've been on the phone with a couple like larger companies trying to get services done and or accomplished, and boy, how easy it is to feel small in these scenarios and just the headaches that come with it. But I have to say, and this is the silver lining here, I have a very solid support system in Sarah. She hears me, she lets me vent, we have a good giggle, I try and make her laugh, and we just get through it with comedy for the most part. We just try and just goof on them basically. But my lord, man, the headaches, and it just like I just go nuclear, right? And so we've just been yucking it up, making fun of some people on the phone, and just keeping it pushing.
Good. I mean, that's kind of how you have to, like, dealing
For
with
sure.
stuff, especially like hold times and like it's brutal. I have to deal with it relatively often now with
Oh,
like TV and internet providers for the community and everything, trying to like every time I call, it's just like they're talking to me like I'm a brick. Like
mm-hmm.
I'm sitting there like I've done this 37 times now. Here's the information you need. Please just like do this thing. Like resend the signal to the cable box. I know what the error code on the TV is. Like I'm like just do this to this cable box and I'll leave you alone. And then
mm.
but I also had to a lot in the hotel industry, so I can feel your pain. It's pretty brutal sometimes, and being like, I would sometimes wait in on hold for over an hour, just like waiting, trying to get a hold of someone, and it can be brutal.
Brutal indeed. Pain was had, but I'm happy to have you to be able to hear about my concerns, and so we can just wash them right down the drain. Now, I think it was a relatively interesting Miami Grand Prix, I would say. But are there any quick hitters we want to get out of the way before we talk about that?
Yeah, so just a few. One, to start off, all pretty motorsport related, but NASCAR is going to have a car driving in Le Mans this year. I don't know exactly how it works. They're kind of driving, it seems, as like an exhibition car, so they're not going to be classified at the end of Le Mans.
Oh, okay.
But I think Jensen Button is one of the drivers who will be driving the car. As far as I can tell, he was photographed in this in the one car in this like tweet that I was seeing about it. So I'm assuming he would be one. I don't know. Maybe they'll get Jensen and Kimmy in it. That would be kind of cool. But moving over to another non-F1 motorsport, Marcus Ericsson reminded me so nicely on Twitter that the Indy 500 is this month coming up at the end of the month on May 28th, which, even though it is weird for us F1 fans watching circle track racing, that is one that I'll at least look to tune into a little bit, because I am curious on how Grosjean's going to do and everything. It's an exciting race. I'm looking forward to kind of checking that out. Another little tidbit that was announced this week, that this is something I found absolutely hilarious, but there was an article or something that was put out, an interview that about Brad Pitt in this new movie that he is filming, and I think he's the star. I don't know if he's helping to direct or whatnot, but
Gotcha.
it's called Apex. And so they had put out that he has been training in an F2 car at Paul Ricard, the French Grand Prix circuit. He's driven over 1,000 kilometers, and they said that Brad Pitt was going to be like on track in a car with F1 teams, like as a 20-second team at like Imola, or no, I think it's Silverstone maybe. And I saw just floods of people on the internet just going, I can't believe that they're putting him out there in, like, this is going to be so disruptive, yada, yada, yada. I never for a split, all these people thought that it was going to be on our actual fucking race weekend. That they were going to throw him out there in a car, like whether F2 car, F1 car. These people thought they were going to throw Brad Pitt out there in the middle of a race weekend to like get some laps in and be filmed. I'm like, no, it's going to be a closed session that they're going to like record some stuff from, which is like exactly what I presumed. Like, I don't know how anyone thought, like, they have to ratify any rules through the FIA, through the teams, through the drivers. Like, it goes through all these people. And you're like, and people are out here thinking that drivers were like, oh yeah, I want to be at a race weekend and accidentally get dive bombed by a movie star and ruin my race. Like, who ever would think that that's a real thing? That blows my mind that people thought that was real. Like, as in he was going to be there during an actual race weekend, like on track during the British Grand Prix. Stupid. So dumb.
Sure. Yeah, I'm curious what the original post looked like, but it probably
sound like he was going to be on track, like they made it, they said like live on track or something. I think people took that. But at the same time, the fact that everyone was like, oh my God, this sounds so dangerous, instead of being like, oh my God, I need to find out a little bit more about this, because that like can't actually be what that means.
Sure.
Like, that's where my head went. I was like, oh, when I hear more information about this, I'm sure that it's like not going to be on a race weekend or like during like a race or anything. I'm like, that would be ridiculous. And although the FIA does ridiculous things sometimes, I was like, that they would not do.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure. Well, I'm curious. I'm curious why. So, like, you're talking about that. I just started thinking about Michael Fassbender. I'm just curious, like, just as like a total layman, like, I'm curious if he was offered the role, maybe busy, maybe it's like Brad Pitt's idea, like what you were saying. But just thinking of like all of these details and everything, I guess what I'm thinking about is like, why wouldn't you want an actor that has some like real like real time on the track. Like, Michael Fassbender has been training for a bunch of like actual like true races and like learning how to do it. That's interesting that they go the like kind of train him up quick route.
I
Whatever, that's fine. Just saying that it's odd that the yes, the initial reaction is just to like assume that they're gonna drop him in with everybody else and pretend like that's a good idea. But because it is a question of like experience, right?
Yeah, but I think so with Brad Pitt and just like he's a nutty guy, but he also is like he does his own stunts frequently. He's done
Sure.
he's
Good
done
point.
his actual stunts for like Mission Impossible, for like climbing on planes and jumping out of things and skydiving and paragliding, like whatever else he's had to do in Mission Impossible. Like he does all his own stunts. So I
Brad Pitt
think,
was in Mission Impossible.
am I getting this confused? Who?
No, I'm pretty sure
No,
Brad Pitt's
I'm
gonna be in the
thinking.
movie. You're thinking
I
about Tom Cruise.
I am thinking about Tom Cruise.
Damn, that's crazy. That's Freudian, bro.
Wow. No,
I never think about Tom Cruise like that. That's dirty.
I think it was because I was like, oh, like action-y movie where he's actually doing like the stunts, and I think my brain just was like, oh, Tom Cruise, and it didn't even
Golden
click.
standard right there.
I take it back. Even more ridiculous than I thought in the first place. But I agree with you on that. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't go for someone who has a bit more experience in the car. But
And that's not a critique. That's just like more of like a generic,
like
question.
a curious, like why him over someone
Brad
else?
Pitt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. That's all.
But yeah, I saw so many like tweets and things about thinking that it was like legit. I even texted my buddy Jeff. I'm like, did you ever think that he was gonna be driving this car on an actual race weekend? And he responded just no. Like that's all he responded with. I was like, thank you. I'm like, these people are nuts.
Silly times we live in.
But that movie will be coming out, I think, either late 2023 or early 2024. So
Sweet.
I think it'll be cool. Lewis Hamilton is one of the producers and an F1 consultant for the film, so he's been working with them on kind of trying to it sounds like the goal is to make it the most realistic like F1 film that has been out there, I guess. So it sounds like having a guy like Lewis Hamilton to help out will probably help them nail some of those finer details a little bit. Just a little bit.
I don't think it could be better than Iron Man 2. That's like a true F1 movie.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And that's like the worst of the Iron Man movies too.
Yeah, I'd say so. But it's
like
the
by
best
far
F1 movie.
Best F1 movie, worst Iron Man movie.
Yes.
But
Two things can be true at the same time.
Not those two things, but
We can agree to disagree.
To speak to some more F1 news. So Andretti this week is submitting their proposal to join F1 officially. So we'll most likely in 2 to 3 weeks, months, I really don't know the time frame, we'll hear back and have more details on if that's going to happen. If it does, it would be for 2026, which would mean with Red Bull, Ford, Ferrari, Mercedes, Renault, Audi, Honda, and GM then for Andretti, there would be just a huge assortment of engine manufacturers on the grid, which is pretty cool. It's a lot different than when Red Bull and Renault were both running Renault power, and Mercedes has Mercedes and Williams and Alfa Romeo, and Ferrari has Ferrari and Haas, and like it'll actually be pretty pretty diverse out there in terms of the engine suppliers, which I think will hopefully make things a little bit more interesting in that new era. But in general, with all the other ones, there will be a lot of options for engines anyway. So I think that'll shake things up a bit.
Yeah, and I'm curious how interested teams are going to be to go with like the great unknown when you have a couple of like tried and true championship winning engine manufacturers.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be interesting to see who kind of, kind of takes the leap.
Yeah, and whether anyone does or not, at least Andretti like currently uses General Motors as their engines. So I think going forward, it like opens up options for other teams to potentially look at different engine suppliers as well. But then looking over towards the Red Bull squad, so Mr. Adrian Newey, who re-signed his contract with Red Bull. Apparently, it came out that Mercedes attempted to sign him and snatch him away. Helmut Marko said that it sounds like Toto doesn't have much trust in his own engineers to fix their car, so had to try and snap. And I mean, Helmut Marko always says inflammatory things. That's his shtick, but.
I mean, that's a reasonable like.
It was a kind of good dig.
Yeah, it is exactly.
But I thought that was a point of interest, and Adrian Newey, it sounds like, has no interest being anywhere but Red Bull. So
Not
that
they're still winning.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, he's one of the biggest reasons why they're winning, and so having been there for a good while now, I feel like it would be kind of weird to just jump ship. It doesn't seem like he's doing this for the money at this point. He's an old guy who likes crushing other people at racing. I think he's pretty content where he's at.
Yeah, it appear that way.
The final little quick hitter was that Liberty Media, who is, I guess, the owner of F1, technically, are looking. They would like to have 10 sprint race weekends next year. That's kind of my reaction. I think that would be a lot. I guess we'll have to wait and see. And I think that if they do that, then I would imagine that it's going to be reeled back by 2025. It just doesn't sound like the best idea to me. But
yeah, and especially I get the feel from the very limited, not limited, but like the vibes that I get are that the sprint isn't like the most favorite thing. So yeah, we'll see. 10 seems like a lot. Maybe there's, like we had talked about previously, like maybe there's a sweet spot. And unfortunately, like we as viewers just kind of have to be along for the ride while they crowdsource their data.
yeah, and as we also mentioned, we're part of the problem because we're like, oh, more F1s on TV, like we'll watch that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I get why they would want more sprint races, but I think if you oversaturate it, it's just not going to be great for the sport in general. So I thought that sounds like a lot, but yeah, that kind of wraps out the quick hitters before we're moving along into the Miami Grand Prix, where we had resurfaced track from last year. There was a lot of complaints about the track service previously. The new track, though, was still tricky. We had our young lad, Nick DeVries, going for a spin in one of the practice sessions, was noted by the stewards for potential dangerous driving from rejoining after his spin. So, granted, he spun in a really bad spot. It was like a blind corner. He was 180 degrees facing the wrong direction. I don't know how you can actually like rejoin the track perfectly from that scenario. But yeah, Nick DeVries, that was not the only moment he had this weekend. But looking at qualifying, what were your thoughts? That was a wild time. I was sitting waiting for the wedding ceremony to start, watching on my phone, being antisocial for a little bit, trying to catch the end of qualifying.
Well, first of all, I think like one of the more interesting things is the conversation about Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton qualifying P13, where George Russell qualifies P6 in qualifying, makes it all the way into Q3. There's some statistic about, oh, this hasn't happened to Mercedes in, X amount of time, whatever. So just surprising in that scenario. Also, we see kind of a surge, I would say, from Haas, Ferrari. We see Hulkenberg P12, Kevin Magnussen P4, but Hulkenberg is likely the true pace of the Haas, because what we end up finding out, yeah, Kevin Magnussen's able to make it into Q3, but is kind of out of position due to the Charles Leclerc intentional crash into the wall to deny anybody else doing laps, which is just, silly, I think, from the Monegasque driver. But yeah, I thought it was a fun qualifying for a conversation about the races that got pretty like, well, we all think we already know what's going to happen. And this was kind of a stir up to that scenario. But a little bit of the same in the sense that we see a Charles Leclerc pushing just a little bit too hard, and it costing him.
Yeah, and so that was one of my big points from qualifying, and so watching, I was really, it took a lot to hold in my emotions as I'm sitting there in my suit waiting for the wedding ceremony to start and watching this happen.
Or calamity?
More frustration, because and so like
Red Bull fan frustration.
Oh, of course. And I mean, like, I'm of the same opinion that Max kind of had on it, which was he messed up his first run, that he was out there, he pushed too hard and had to pull out of his initial hot lap and just didn't place a representative time. So he's like, yeah, like, I messed up, and so yeah, I didn't get the opportunity to get out there. But I think Red Bull needs to make sure that Max is out on track before Charles now, because like I watched that video I told you about a couple weeks back of all the Leclerc crashes and everything, and like what it is, and so this is from Martin Brundle, but he said essentially that he feels like Leclerc is consistently pushing beyond his limits in the car, and beyond his limits and beyond the car's limits. And so with that, if you're taking the car to the limit as like all the time, you're gonna have what we see from Leclerc, which is really, really good single lap pace.
Of course.
When everything hooks up properly. But when it doesn't, or when you push a little too far, this is what we end up seeing. And we have seen this now a number of times, where there's only one time that I can think of Max like having this kind of incident, and it was, I think, at Abu Dhabi, or it was like, it's this qualifying lap, he was up like 2/10 on Lewis, and I think it might have been Abu Dhabi 2021, but he was like
Okay.
2/10 up on Lewis through the middle sector, and he hits the wall in the last turn.
Yeah.
And so that's the only time that I can remember Max doing that. And I think it kind of does speak to like, yeah, Max is qualifying. Like, he does get a number of pole positions, but he is not as dominant when it comes to pole positions as Leclerc is. But when it comes to that race pace and everything and his consistency, you do see that kind of shine through a bit. But with Leclerc, yeah, I just feel like he continually like pushes too hard and just doesn't quite know where that limit is. And I feel like that is kind of the big difference between him or like a Max or a Lewis, where those guys are able to drive very close to the limit, but with like they know where that is and really don't often push beyond it. At least in a racing or like important scenario, maybe during a practice session or an errant gust of wind on the track or something like that. But yeah, I feel like we see this from Leclerc more often than we should for someone who's considered to be his quality of driver.
Yeah, and then also like to not create dissonance in the conversation about Ferrari, where like it seems like people want them to be the constructor name that you say in contention against Red Bull in this little era, in this little year, but it's performances like this that make you really question like, does Red Bull have like an honest rival, an honest like really tough time here? If these things like keep happening, I don't think so. And you have to kind of be honest about the narrative and say like, yeah, unfortunately nobody is like really on their level right now. And that's
Yeah.
okay, but let's just call a spade and not be like the rivals Ferrari. It's like the one's trying to catch up Ferrari.
No, yeah, no one is. I think that the point you made there, like, I don't think anyone is Red Bull's rival this season.
Not yet.
Not yet, but at this point, unfortunately, it may be a little bit too far out of some teams' hands. I mean, second place is so Red Bull has more than double their points right now over Aston Martin. Red Bull's at 224 points, 4-1-2s out of 5 races. Aston Martin's at 102 points. Like, it's just that I don't think there will be anyone who competes with Red Bull or is their rival this year. Even when teams may slowly catch up or take a little bit out of that big gap that Red Bull has, but I don't think it will be close in the constructors standings. But looking at Leclerc still a little bit, he ended up, because of that, also having to take a new gearbox, which is now his third gearbox out of the 4 allowed during the season. So he's on his third gearbox after not even 1/4 of the races that for the season. So that is going to really start working to their detriment, I would imagine, by race 12, 13 of the season, potentially, barring him having even any other incidents that cause issues. But I mean, then we look at his counterpart, Carlos Sainz. Carlos is going out there, putting in a P3 lap time in qualifying, really, really solid qualifying as a whole. In the 127s each round there for lap times. So like some real solid consistency for Carlos. And then of course leading to the Hispanic top 3 that we had with Checo, Fernando Alonso, and Carlos Sainz. That was pretty neat.
Hispanic top three. What do you mean?
Checo's from Mexico, Fernando
Mm-hmm.
Alonso's from Spain,
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Sainz from Spain also. So
Mm.
they're all Spanish speaking gentlemen.
Was wait, was that the oh, gotcha. Because when you were saying that, I had clicked to the race result. I was like,
Oh
he must be talking about like
no,
I
just
caught
the
it. I caught it very quickly.
yeah. But end of qualifying, and then of course Fernando Alonso got asked when he thinks that Max was going to catch him, and he's like, oh, like lap 25. How about lap 14, 15? That,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, but exciting to see the three of them driving really well, being at the top of the qualifying charts. That was pretty cool. I'm glad to see Alonso and Aston Martin kind of continuing to have a solid start to the year after a little bit of a waiver the previous race in Baku. But Kevin Magnussen, like you said, an awesome P4. Pierre Gasly sneaking in there at P5 too.
Mm-hmm.
Just a really awesome lap that he put in. Alpine had a nice weekend as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like it didn't seem like the type of pace that was. Well, maybe it was a little bit track dependent, but it did kind of seem like they've been, making some good changes with their upgrade paths, and it seems like it's getting them some pace on track. Because yeah, he was a little bit a part of the Q3 kerfuffle, obviously, but yeah, I think with the qualifying pace and then also the P8 finish in the race, like I think it is indicative of like possibly good things to come from Alpine. Like, would you agree?
Oh, I would definitely agree. I think
Mm-hmm.
Otmar's talked about it in some interviews that there's a lot of pressure from their ownership and everything to perform well and all. And I think after last year, I mean, we're talking week after week, especially on the faster tracks, about the kind of rocket ship that they had in a straight line when
Mm-hmm.
Alonso was putting in some really good times and
Ah.
everything. So I mean, and Ocon did as well, but I feel like Alonso was the more commonly discussed person there with Alpine. But I think Otmar said that he thinks that they could fight for that second place and everything, and that's the kind of performance that makes me think that yeah, maybe they can as we're continuing into the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I hope to see that kind of qualifying pace and then following race pace to continue from Alpine. Because it will at least give us something interesting to look at while the Red Bulls just run away at the top of the field.
Yeah, and I mean, like right now we're looking at the constructors. Alpine is way down there. I mean, we've got Red Bull at 224, Aston Martin 102, Mercedes 96, so a tight second place fight. Ferrari at 78 points, not too far off. But then we have McLaren and Alpine tied at 14 points. So
Mm-hmm.
pretty far down. They did have Alpine did have the double DNF a couple of races ago at Australia, which really hurt them. But even still, they would be about 40 points behind Ferrari, even if they
Yeah.
had finished those there. So I think it's good progress. I'd love to see them continue that to really show that they are making that progression and bringing those upgrades. They're gonna bring them back into the fight a little bit with teams that legitimately I would say they should be able to fight with based on at least last year's performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not off the top of my head, not sure what the calendar looks like, but we may just want to check in and see, are they like on the faster tracks are they achieving those, these similar kinds of results, and then look to
Gotcha.
see, possibly what kind of issues they have on the like slower and more slow and more slow and medium speed corners, and see where their performance strengths are, because I think you're right, there may be elements of kind of track dependent performance going on here. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and so as as we get further into the season, I'm sure we'll get a better idea. I don't know off the top of my head either, like what tracks they've like excelled at more than others, and so I'd have to look into that. But yeah, I was definitely impressed with both of their qualifying performance. But leading into the race day and everything, one thing that I have to bring up, and I want to hear your thoughts, is the driver introduction ceremony. I know we're dipping away from the racing for a second, but I want to just give it to me straight. I want to hear what you think about it.
In the moment, I wanted it to stop so bad. Just the cheerleaders, the way they put will.i.am out there, like in the middle, where the drivers had to like walk by the conductor to just
LL
like go
Cool
and
J, thank you very much.
no,
Or are
no.
you?
Well, first they had to walk by LL Cool J, and then they were walking towards a will.i.am who was like directing the orchestra, but like at them. He wasn't looking at the orchestra. He was looking forward at the drivers.
Okay,
and
I didn't even. I was so like intent on LL Cool J's introductions that I like didn't even realize that. I saw they cut to him a couple times. And I'm like, I want to see LL announce these people.
Right. So just so many elements that me and Sarah were just like, and what about this? What's going on here? This is wild. We just wanted it to stop so bad. But in going back and thinking about it, like, it was not, it probably did not take any longer than any of the other intros, any of the, setup ceremonies. And also, I agree with you. LL Cool J did an awesome job with the intros, keeping the energy up. There was like, they actually found something very interesting to say about each of the drivers. And then, obviously this is just something people brought up, so I'll comment, is like, yeah, he did get all of their names pronounced right, and good for him. That's cool. But overall, I was just more impressed with like the energy and the I guess commitment to the host position there from LL, so that was really cool. But yeah, overall, it's just like, it's so funny how our idea, like, it's like, to me, it's this feeling of going to a basketball game but wearing a Flyers jersey, where you're just like, I'm sports, believe me, I'm sports. Right?
There's there's an older YouTube video with Kyle, who was on SNL. Sporty with Kyle.
Yes.
Sports.
Yes. Just ridiculous. And but it's that kind of feeling where it's like, to a motorsport event, we think, as the United States, we think the right answer is give them a football jersey with their name on it, bring out the cheerleaders, musicians, we love musicians, and movie stars. And then the organizer's like, yeah, but what does all that have to do with racing? It's fanfare, people. Got it. Fanfare. And it's just, that's kind of what it feels like. Flyers jersey to a basketball game.
Okay. I can understand that, and I can feel, or like, I can agree with you on part, like, it does seem out of place in the world of F1 when we're
just like a twin,
like, like you're right. Yeah, it's like something's like not something's slightly off. Like maybe can't even place it. Like if this was your first F1 race that you had watched and you're watching this intro, you might just be like, okay, like this is like kind of normal. Like in the NBA playoffs, they're sitting there and they're like, and you're starting 5, starting at center, 7 feet tall, Joel Embiid. Like you have that excitement, and that's kind of how we do those things. Like we make a big deal about our athletes as like individual people. So as opposed to like, I feel like when you're looking, obviously there are superstars in like European football and things like that, like the Messi, the Ronaldo and whatnot, but people are bigger fans of like teams. I feel like we have like a lot of people in the US who are like specifically fans of like individual players, where like they might even follow, like someone might be a LeBron fan and so they're wearing a Cleveland Cavaliers jersey when he's on the Cavs, then they're burning it and buying their Miami Heat jersey when he goes to Miami, then buying the Cleveland Cavaliers one again when he goes back, and then buying the Los Angeles Lakers. Like there are people who I think in the US appreciate this, like from the way our sporting typically is and the way we do things. So
for sure.
So on that side, I like really appreciate that they are trying to tailor it to the American audience. Will Buxton said that the driver arrivals were. So he said driver arrivals today were the best of the breed so far. So the best of like this. I think they've done these a couple times previously for U.S. races. They said LL Cool J was on point with pronunciation and excitement, hype through the roof. The crowd loved it here. And so, like, when you're in that, like maybe it looked cringy a bit on TV and whatnot, but the crowd there, like, a lot of those people, and from things I saw all week about, like, all these influencers and celebrities that had nothing to do with F1 getting like passes to go and be there to like try and draw more audience on F1's side, like I think it kind of helps. Like there could be a ton of people there that don't really know these people as well, or know like the little tidbits about them that LL Cool J was like saying, even though some of those things are like were a little hyperbole and a little just over the top. I think it helps like them to like understand it a little bit more, like see who these guys are instead of a helmet inside a car going down around the corner past them or whatnot. But yeah, I thought LL Cool J did an awesome job with it. I thought it was pretty cool. The one on the other side of it, though, the one thing that I can appreciate as well, kind of against this, was George Russell basically said, like, I'm not really a big fan of this. It's distracting. Like, normally at this point in time, they're like in their car, sitting with their engineers around them and everything on the grid, like waiting for the formation lap, getting all their bits and details like locked in, focused. And this does take them out of it. Like we saw some of the drivers wanted nothing to do with it. Nick DeVries, well, I think went faster past LL Cool J than he did on track all day. Like he was, he had no interest in any of it. Like didn't even glance towards LL. He just like head down, power forward, like get me over this. But I appreciated like Lewis, like going and Lewis did his normal thing. He's a really super charismatic guy. He goes over with LL and he's like, yeah, Miami, let's go, like, and everything. Max, like, whether he wanted to be interviewed or not, like right before the race, had a nice little like back and forth with LL for a minute. Like I don't know. It wasn't that bad, but I can understand how it would bring them out of that, like, ready to go kind of mindset.
And honestly, if Max was like ready to go and in a better mindset, he would have just like had a better start, honestly. Like he was so slow and it's honestly like LL's fault.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I was gonna say, the distracting part that George Russell was talking about. I mean, it could have been Nick DeVries's excuse, but because he didn't even like let it phase him, he just locked in and powered through. I can't even give it to him as an excuse for how garbage his driving was at the start of the race, ruining both the McLaren's races, which that just killed me. But yeah, I can understand the kind of unusualness that it brought, but it's starting to be talked about that they potentially, like F1 potentially wants to do this for 6 to 7 races, and like shifting it a little bit based on the local venue and everything.
Of course,
like they kind of like are looking to add this excitement. Like, yeah, in the US in Miami, it's going to be the Miami Dolphins cheerleaders. In Austin, it's going to be the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
Right,
in Las Vegas, it's going to be the ladies from just down the street. I don't know. I think the US is different, but if they're doing it for 6 or 7 races, there's going to be other like cool places around the world that could have some really neat, like I imagine Mexico having like one would be wild. Like the crowd there has been fantastic for the past couple years that we've had the Mexican Grand Prix. Like I think there's opportunities that for us, like other countries are going to be looking at it like, oh no, all our cliches in one intro. Just like we initially kind of were looking at it. So,
and that would be an interesting shift. Yeah, you've made a lot of good points here. I think I may want to add this in where I think you raise an interesting point where I was likely underrating the strength of the crowd in that scenario where, yeah, it may just like not have looked that great on the cam. And I was like kind of cluing into the driver's
I felt a little
body language.
Cringy watching it too. Like, trust me, I'm with you on that and everything. I felt like a little secondhand discomfort. But afterwards, seeing like people online, like Will Buxton saying that the crowd was like loving it. It was like getting them into it. I'm like,
it gives a little like context for it.
Definitely. So
yeah, I think you've changed my mind a little bit. And I mean, if it gives the opportunity for like fun and interesting like hosts to be doing these, like, oh, you get this person from over here and you get this person doing it like when they're in this country, you're right. I think there would be a lot of interesting and creative elements that they could do to help us as like viewers and fans like get to know the drivers a little bit better, because you're right, we do just see them like with helmets just fucking locked in a lot. If you're not like checking into the YouTube stuff and this and that, it's a good way to get that on the F1 broadcast in some small sense.
Yeah, and so and shout out to LL on all the pronunciations and everything. He did well. It's not always the easiest. The only one that I was so there were two parts of it that I just like have to admit I was cracking up at, because one, he said just Pierre Gasly, and his emphasis was on the Lee at the end, and I just wanted him to be like Pierre Gasly, just like I feel like we hear on the broadcast periodically and all. I wanted him to like get into it like that. But the other one was when he's talking about Nico Hulkenberg and like he's like nicknamed the Hulk for his like strength on the or whatever the fuck he said. I'm like, and for his last name literally starting with Hulk. Like,
Well, my man thought it was Hockenberg.
I
That's how it sounded like he said it for that one. And I was like, damn, 19 for 20 LL.
But either way, I was like, yeah, he's nicknamed the Hulk because it's his fucking last name.
Right.
But yeah, I digress. Looking at the race itself, I enjoyed the race a lot. I thought that this was a solid race. Lots of like good on track passing and things. We talked about Baku not having hardly any, which we kind of expect less at a Baku type street circuit compared to Miami. Even though it is still a street circuit, there were, I think, a little bit better opportunities for passing there. But I mean, we had 80 passes, I think it was, on track. Or no, it was 60 compared to 23 at Baku. A big difference. Some really good action. Lewis had a couple of really nice passes where he was able to get the DRS, move up, and then I think it was his pass on Leclerc where he was able to take the inside of the corner and make that stick pretty well. But I thought it was a good race. I saw a lot of differing opinions online, but I enjoyed it a lot and felt like it was as exciting as it could be. And I'll say, like, based on the way the race like was kind of set up by Pirelli a little bit, and that's just something that I want to talk about a little bit more. Once I just want to get your thoughts. What did you think watching through the race? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was good? Is it as good as I'm thinking it was, or?
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned Pirelli because I think my first angle was going to be talking about the tire strategies that
Go
we
for
saw
it. No,
teams running.
We can dig into it.
I think it was one of recent times in memory where actively watching the race, I understood, like, as it's happening, I had some understanding or at least guesses at like what the teams were going for, understanding what I was looking at, seeing like, okay, these drivers are starting on mediums, these ones are starting on hards, and then seeing the pit timings then for the mediums, seeing the drivers then that who stayed out on their hard tires go up the grid, the medium tires then fall down because they, these guys haven't pitted yet, and then the hard tires pitting for their like just seeing it all working and understanding kind of the long game of it, where previously in some way I think my understanding is just like maybe like a driver to driver basis and having like a narrow window of understanding about like when they're looking to go to the pits. But this is a race where I was looking and seeing like, okay, so this driver started on these tires, same team as this driver, but started on these tires. So you see like different strategies going on in that scenario. And then you get kind of the nice, clean layup payoff where it's like, yeah, so this is what happens when you have one driver start like this, the other driver start like this, when those strategies are inverted just by way of how they started, Max was going to have the advantage at the end of the race based on that tire setup. And you can look at a couple other teams that did the offset strategy. So it felt like an interesting race from that perspective. The like seeing the tire strategies working for the teams in a way that I'm not sure I really saw all the ones and zeros before.
Yeah, I think that this is an easy race to kind of see that in, which I definitely agree with you there. Because and unfortunately, like I said, I would have loved to see how the soft tires did for Lando and for Oscar coming down from the bottom of the grid. I would love to see them move up a number of places early on in those laps with the fresh soft tires and like get past people and everything, and then try and hang on to those tires as long to get to the hards and go from there. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that because of the contact with De Vries at the start of the race, but as a whole, you could see it pretty easily, especially with like the inverted strategies and whatnot. A lot of it was like not knowing how far you could push certain tires. So when it's like Max on the hard tires and everything, and he's still able to keep putting in these laps that are going purple and setting fastest laps on 35 lap old hard tires, where other teams are like, oh, like my guy's only gonna be on the hard tires for 30 laps and this guy's been on them for 35 and he's still like putting in these, like maybe the hard tires would have been the better ones to be on for longer term than trying to push the mediums as far. I think my frustration a little bit on the Pirelli end though is just the more that I see them and the more that I watch F1, the more I dislike one-stop races. Like, a one-stop race, in my mind, should have to be a driver stretching the hards and stretching the mediums, essentially, to, like, get to the end of the race. I want to see soft tire, hard tire, soft, medium, soft, hard, soft, like for those tire strategies and everything, because the pit stops like can be so important. And to talk about something that I didn't even really think of initially, Alexander Rossi after the race had tweeted out, or maybe it was even during the race, he said the penalty for speeding in the pit lane is only 5 seconds, question mark, exclamation point. He said, I'm speechless at F1, because he thought it was ridiculous that Sainz comes into the pits, gets the pit lane speeding infraction, only a 5-second penalty, because when you look at it in the context of the race, someone was like, oh, come on, man, the penalties, like, he barely was going too fast and yada, yada, yada. Alexander Rossi's like, he came out half a second ahead of, like, four dudes. That speeding in the pit lane could have been the exact difference of him ending up in front of those guys or ending up in a DRS train that hangs him out to dry on his new tires for a while.
And you have to assume that the driver knows exactly what they're doing.
You have to. I mean,
right.
And like there are situations. I think there was one last year where I think it was Ocon. He had like gotten some damage to the car early on in the race, and when he hit his pit limiter button on his steering wheel, the sensor was malfunctioned and he was going like 1 mile per hour over the pit lane speed. Like, I think that was the fiasco Ocon race where it was like he was just getting tagged up with stuff. But things like that happen. But in this situation, like, you're like, oh yeah, well, he locked up coming into the pits. Well, he knew that he had to be flying in there to try and make sure he was getting out. I'm sure, like, we were, especially at the end of the race, we kept hearing from Red Bull about, oh, like the 20 seconds is the the magic number that they were saying Max needed to be at to be able to come out ahead of Checo, and he didn't do it. So from Alexander Rossi's perspective as an IndyCar driver, he's like, yo, so this dude speeds in the pit lane, comes out ahead of these guys, potentially because of that, gets a 5-second penalty when he could have been stuck in a DRS train behind these guys for who knows how long, and easily, like, that makes up for the 5 seconds that he lost with the penalty. I thought that was an interesting perspective, and like you said, with these pitch strategies, it's tough to find the windows and the gaps in the field to get your driver in clean air and everything. So you do, like, the pit walls are looking at that so closely to say, okay, like, we're 7/10 up on this driver down the grid. So if we pit in 2 laps instead of on this lap, if we keep gaining that much ground on them, then we'll come out ahead. But otherwise, we could come out behind them and get stuck and all this stuff. But to extrapolate that further, like, a 2-stop strategy just makes that even more difficult to figure out and everything, and adds a lot more wrinkles, a lot more interest. Having drivers on the soft tires more often. I feel like we've hardly seen the soft tires this season thus far. We've seen them here and there, but everyone's going mediums and hard tires doing these one-stop strategies. I'd love to see, like we saw at the end of the IndyCar race at whatever it was, the St. Petersburg or the Children's Grand Prix of Alabama, where Grosjean is on the standard strategy. We've got Kirkwood on the alternate tires at the end, which are essentially their softs, having like way crazier pace at the end to go past. Like, it just shakes things up a bit more, and I think a lot of people, and this will kind of carry us into another topic I wanted to mention a little bit, but I think there's a lot of people and fans who are looking for every single race to be some blockbuster, just absolutely wild, amazing, crazy good race. Like, every single race you see, like, I'm seeing people immediately on Twitter afterwards, or whether it's like the WTF1 guys or the P1 podcast guys doing, oh, what do you rate this race out of 10 and whatnot, and comparing that, like, each race, or people on Twitter afterwards like, oh, this race was so bad, or oh, I wish every race could be as good as this one. It's like, when you're watching sports, like, not every Phillies game, not every Eagles game that I watch are super fun, exciting, amazing games. Some of them are kind of boring. Like, that happens in every sport. And I feel like there's this, like, perspective that F1 needs to be that every single race. I don't think it does, but I think if you're gonna, like, try and, like, invite it to be a little more interesting or exciting or whatnot, having more tire strategy options, like somewhat, like, yeah, like the one stoppers that are doing a medium tire and a hard tire, or the 2 stoppers going medium soft, or a soft hard, like, those different strategies that you can do, I think does add the potential for it to be more exciting, more interesting for the viewer as a whole.
Just one argument from maybe the side of Pirelli would be, we can't sacrifice the safe tire option for the exciting tire option.
I can understand that. Like, I'm definitely not advocating for tire blowouts on the 170 mile per hour straight at Baku. Like,
dude, like, that was scary. Like, that had me like worried for many future races of just like,
Oh yeah.
do these tires just pop?
Yep. And
Yeah,
so
that's not cool.
I feel you, but don't think that I don't think they have to sacrifice both, because
Sure.
Pirelli is giving, like, Pirelli gives the teams general windows of, oh, this tire should last. Like, the pit windows that they give for the tires are from, like, essentially from Pirelli saying, like, yeah, this tire should last between 10 and 20 laps, or 10 and 17 laps, or whatever. When they show those pit windows on the AWS graphics or whatever during the race, like, I can only assume that those are coming from Pirelli saying this is how long we expect these tires to last, not necessarily from like the broadcast team going, well, I think that the mediums should probably.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think that they, like, if they know that, plus the teams in a normal weekend, not a sprint weekend, but a normal weekend with 3 practice sessions, have time to test out all the different tires and everything, and in a less intense environment be able to figure out how long those tires should last and whatnot. So in that essence, I would say, like, I do agree 100%. Do not sacrifice tire stability and safety for excitement. But I think that if it's done properly, which I would imagine Pirelli's able to do, they can create tires that maybe have a little more deg, but then they just, like, let everyone know, like, hey, these tires are going to wear out a little bit faster. Like, don't expect to be able to run these unless you're being a super saver and and saving that rubber
Sure.
for as long as you can. I think that would bring a little more of that excitement that people are looking for. If people are looking for on-track passes and things like that, a dude coming out of the pits on soft tires trying to make up the 20 seconds that he just lost on a pit stop to someone who's going on a one-stop strategy when he's going on a two-stop, that's a lot more exciting than just like, well, this guy pitted on lap 13 from the mediums to go on the hards, and now he's dragging those things to the end of the race. Or, oh, this guy dragged these hard tires for 45 laps, and now he's going to be on faster tires at the end of the race. Like, there's more intrigue that you can build in that way, and hopefully I would only want that done in a safe manner, because, like, I totally agree. Like, those we talked about it on the podcast, those blowouts, we're like, dear God, like, is that gonna happen again? Like,
Right.
that's terrifying. So I definitely feel you on that side of things as well.
But yeah, I mean, overall, like, I'm such an easy sell, dude. Like, I just enjoy every race. Like, there's fun
Same.
things to just like hold on to and grab out and, find exciting. And just like looping all the way back to what you were talking about, the ovals with IndyCar is like, it is like a style difference in how you watch. Like, yeah, I get it. It's 200 laps, but you just like find interesting little battles. You like get 2 or 3 longer storylines in your head that you're kind of following, and just the moment to moment things that you can find that are interesting. See how drivers are taking this line, like, oh, he's going like a little wide here. Just like all of these things are, to me, what make the races interesting. I
Yeah.
don't I don't think I've ever had the thought of like, I need 50 overtakes a weekend, or I'm selling the house.
No,
You know?
I'm with you. I definitely, I love F1. I love racing. That's why I've, like, started watching more of these other racing series.
Yeah, of
Man,
course.
when I'm, like, getting ready for work in the morning, like, every, like, couple weeks I've got MotoGP and, like, like super bike races going on my
Mm-hmm.
phone as I'm like getting dressed on you and like watching YouTube or whatever to like distract myself about going into work. I'm like I love racing. It's fun. It's exciting. I think IndyCar, one of the great things that they have is like the different strategies with the fuel, with the tires. They do
Mm-hmm.
have to pit so many times and everything. Like someone could be going lower fuel, or the pit stop could be 5 seconds longer for one team because they're really like loading up a shit ton of fuel into that car or something like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
those wrinkles make it more interesting because it adds a little bit of unexpectedness to everything, as opposed to like I enjoyed the Miami Grand Prix. I thought there were a lot of good overtakes. For a bit of the race though, my mind's focus was just lap after lap. What's the gap between Max and Checo? Gap, gap, gap.
Mm-hmm.
What's the gap? What's the gap? What's the gap? Oh, what's the pit stop? How long? Oh, what's the gap? What's it like that? That's what, as especially as a Red Bull fan, knowing that the way things were going, it was going to be a Red Bull 1-2. That's how my mind was going, as opposed to like, oh, well, maybe like this pit stop could last longer than that one, or maybe the tire strategy, maybe Max is on hard tires than mediums, but Checo is running a soft, medium, soft strategy or something like that. Like that
Mm-hmm.
adds just that extra bit that I think with like IndyCar or some of these other ones you get. Nonetheless, I love F1. I enjoy every race. I have a blast. I enjoy Max and Checo going P1, P2. No complaints from me.
Of course.
But but looking at like other kind of drivers to the race, one like just side weird one. Did you see Alonso, like the whole thing about him complimenting Lance's pass during the race?
Oh yeah, I guess like he had an eye on like one of the big screens when it was happening to
I
like hits the
saw
radio.
I saw where he saw it. They like replayed a clip of him where you could see like on the big screen Lance's pass. He's going into one of the hairpins,
Mm-hmm.
and he's
He's
like,
watching
and
TV.
he's just watching the billboard.
Mm-hmm.
Hilarious, amazing. I guess it's just muscle memory at this point for the man. But a couple other just like shout outs that I had from the race. For one, P10, K Mag getting that championship point. That I love. I love seeing some of these teams that are down towards the bottom and are having some more struggles and everything get up into the points. So that was awesome to see from Magnussen to be able to take that P4 and keep it up in the points in the standings by the end of the race. The other one though that you love, I love, our boy Yuki Tsunoda. He has driven so consistently and so well, and I know I've been picking on DeVries a bit, but Yuki's kind of making him look worse, going
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big
P11,
time.
P11, P10, P10, P11, just consistent, solid performances. Shout out to Yuki. He has been putting that AlphaTauri higher on the grid than I think it necessarily belongs, but due to having more consistent performances and good drives than some of the other cars that maybe could or should beat him, just
Mm-hmm.
not being as consistent. So big shout out to Yuki. I love to see that. Even though he's not really getting the points,
Mm-hmm.
he's doing what he can with that car.
Dude, and again, to your point of the like, what's it got to take to make a good race, especially when the season is so long, it's about finding these moments to key into and look at a particular driver over the course of like a small sample of races, but understand like, so one element that we have going on here is a driver that is hitting a very consistent mark just within one or two spaces of positions of each other. And I think these are the things that you can kind of key into over a long season where, yeah, maybe you don't have all these blockbuster races, but there's always going to be these details that you can pull out and say like, oh, okay, so this little element here was part of the context. This was going on while, we thought it was some boring competition at the top. Well, here's Yuki Tsunoda actually having his best season yet, which is, from that like small perspective, like very exciting.
Yeah, and I think like especially outside of like the top of the grid teams, the performances like are so all over the place from other people that are around the same area. I mean, we see Lando P 17 17 6 9 17, like Gasly 9 9 DNF 14 8. Ocon DNF 8, DNF 15 9. So Yuki's like all of these drivers, Nico Hulkenberg 15 12 7 17 15, to have a guy go 11 11 10 10 11, like that is a very small margin of error that Yuki's putting out there, and
like that is impressive.
Super impressive.
Agreed.
You love to see it. It's they're the only people outside of Yuki that are putting in that same kind of consistency are all up there in the top 6, 7, 8 drivers on the grid, really. So yeah, big shout out to Yuki. But I guess were there any other notes or tidbits that you wanted to hit before we move on to the MSI chit chat?
Not necessarily, although I'm sure you heard this. The Alfa Romeo team is being scolded by their some of their company officials for the performances that they've had. What's her name? Lauren Rossi, I think her name is.
Lauren Rosen, maybe.
Gotcha.
Lauren Rosen.
We can just
Lauren Rosen is one of the Sixers interviewers. Sorry.
Oh, nice. That's me too. But yeah, just
mixing up my sports.
One of the Alfa Romeo officials was not speaking very highly about their team in the media when asked about the recent like Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas results, and that never really bodes well. You don't really want to hear it. Many of these teams have a lot of good things to say about each other, like internally, like members of the team speaking highly of other members of the team. It's just indicative of a little bit of dissonance, and just something that I'm going to track moving forward and see like what actual steps Alfa Romeo takes moving forward to hopefully like curb some of these results and like achieve, I guess, what the company actually believes their marks are, as opposed to like what they're actually hitting. So I just thought that was an interesting element from the weekend. They kept bringing it up, and I was like, that's shitty.
Yeah, especially like I think Zhou and Valtteri's obviously shown the kind of quality of driver he is. He has a lot of skill and talent. So Zhou as well, like he had a great rookie year. We've seen him like progress as a driver, but right now the car is just not keeping up with like what we would hope for him and everything. So it's kind of the same as the McLaren. It's like I'm bummed to see them not performing well, because it's weird, like as an F1 fan, like even though I'm a Red Bull fan, I do genuinely like, when we were going through our preseason expectations for the drivers and everything, I'm like, oh, and this guy and that guy. And like, I really hope that they do better than last year. I'm like, I hope every driver does better than they did last year, which is, of course, impossible. Someone has to finish P19, someone has to finish P20. It's not just like allotted to Latifi anymore. We've moved past that. So it's, so we like, it's kind of tough because like I do, there are all these guys that I want to be successful and pull for and everything. And I was hyped to see Magnussen P4 after qualifying and things like that. But then when I see Lando Norris starting at the bottom of the grid, I'm like, well, it's like
Right.
there's that like trade off. One guy does better means one guy's doing worse, or a number of guys are doing worse. So yeah, it's definitely a good thing to keep tabs on as we move forward to see if those expectations and whatnot and performances like shift at all, or kind of track that and see if there's any change to that as we move forward through the season.
But yeah, overall, I think it was a fun return back to Miami, and I guess we'll look forward to it on the calendar for a couple more years here.
Yeah, and we've got Italy coming up, not this weekend, but the following. So we've got the race there, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix over at the Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari.
That was great.
I was just reading it straight from the screen, throwing an accent in there. So
I mean,
so I get for
really
watching
well.
Ford versus Ferrari a couple weeks back, but yeah, we've got plenty of F1 and a long season here still to go. But looking at the mid-season invitational for League of Legends, why don't you just kind of take us through? We had some play-in groups kind of wrapping up, and then leading into, we've had 2 of the first best of 5 series in the group stage. So why don't you take us a little bit through that play-ins and kind of how those wrapped out going into this bracket stage?
So I think in the play-ins, we decided that a bunch of this is like kind of to be expected in a way. A couple of interesting notes though was I'm trying to see what the lower bracket game was. What was interesting was Golden Guardians getting through on they get dropped down to, or no, they just beat GAM, so they dropped GAM down into the losers bracket. They end up taking a game off BLG, which like I didn't expect at all. And then they end up doing pretty well. So I think North America getting through, I think for somebody that was like lower on them for like, I was probably giving them like some spite points, you know what I mean? Just like, fuck these guys. You got to give them their flowers. I think they did really well, and I think have showed up with a really solid plan in the early stages of the tournament, is what you could say about GG.
Oh, 100%. But like at the same time, I completely feel you on in terms of not having high expectations. I mean, these guys finished 9-9 in North America during the regular season for the spring split. They just end up going on this little tear in playoffs to some extent. They go to 5 games in 2 series on their way to through the losers bracket to the final versus Cloud9. But I didn't have high expectations. They had that. I thought, hey, maybe it's a little bit of a flash in the pan. We've seen some of the meta and whatnot change here as we're going into MSI. We're seeing some different picks in the jungle, in the top lane, in the mid lane, and all. I kind of didn't really expect them to necessarily perform, let alone take a game off Billy Gaming, who I feel like was a team that easily would just like cruise through that play and into the bracket stage. To take a game off them, where I mean, that's the only game that they lost. I know they only played 2 best of 3s, but for that to be the only game that they lose in that initial play-in stage and everything, I think speaks to how Golden Guardians is playing, along with just like, I feel like we shit on North America and League of Legends so much that maybe it makes us think that we're slightly worse than we actually are sometimes. Like, I think like NA is one of the 4 major regions
a negativity bias
for a reason. Did I expect them to take a game off the second qualifying team from China? No. Did I expect them to perform badly? No. But there's that thing in the back of your mind that you're like, well, like, GAM might be able to, like, do something crazy and take them out. But no, that Golden Guardians just took care of business. 2-0 GAM in that first matchup. Take a game off Billy Gaming. 2-0 R7 in the losers bracket. Going off to that last chance qualifier. And 3-0 PSG. Not quite what I was expecting. I expected a little more resistance from some of these other teams, I think, than what we ended up seeing.
Yeah, and man, I just like, you have to wonder, it can't be a format thing. Like, we all thought it was a format problem with the best of 1s, and now it's happening with the best of 3s, where like the underdog team isn't able to come up with a good enough strategy to even take a game. So again, I was having these feelings of like, dude, just isn't there just like one company that you can give broadcasting rights to so they can do like an invitational or something? Just like one more over the year, because it just feels like these stage games that the teams get, it feels like they're just like exhibition matches in some way. Even though, and I didn't want you to be right when we were talking about
I didn't want to be right either.
That was my angle.
No, I didn't want to be right either. I just felt like I that's what I was feeling.
You knew.
I was,
yeah.
It was the unfortunate expectation. I just, yeah, like I looked at it and I'm like, you're just going straight into best ofs? Like, yeah, okay, these teams are scrimming against each other and whatnot, but they're not scrimming against the teams that they're playing. They're scrimming against the people from the other playing group. Because they know that only 3 of those teams are getting out, so, like, just even a 1-game round robin, even if you seed it the same way, but just to get that like, a couple stage games under each team's belt, I like, even if it means nothing in the standings, give them that like little bit of, this is an international tournament. Like, this is the second biggest tournament in League of Legends throughout the year, and we are having teams that have, I mean, look at PSG Talon. Ozzy, Husha, Hongsuo, Waka, Woody. Like, I don't think any of those guys were on the PSG Talent team that went to Worlds last year. These guys have. I think it's a full new lineup. From a team that had, so none of those players have international experience, let alone international stage experience, and you're just throwing them out into an immediate best of 3. Like, yeah, PSG won their first matchup. They won against Loud, but like, these, I think they're missing time off in between splits. They're not getting that rest. They're not getting that recuperation that other teams in the regions are getting. Like, make it worthwhile for them. They're traveling to just wherever MSI is every year, rotating around the globe. traveling, getting jet lag, like in weird environments, like practicing not on the current patches that are going to be coming up for the summer split, practicing
Right.
on old patches to play against teams and everything at this invitational. At least make the trip and the effort worth it, as opposed to like teams having the potential to like DFM gets 2-0'd twice and they're like, well, you played 4 games, guys, see you in Japan. Like,
Mm,
send them on their way. That's, I think, more where I was coming from, but I'm also not surprised that it shook out this way. Those best of
of
ones
course.
are the best opportunity for teams to bring out interesting strategies and whatnot.
Hmm.
In a best of 3, teams aren't gonna like, especially in like a best of 1 round robin where the seeding doesn't necessarily matter at all. That's the best opportunity for you to see some exciting games and different strategies. In a best of 3, where it matters a ton, all the teams, of course, are going to try and play their best strategy as best they can and all,
Hmm.
whether that is something cheesy or not that might pick up a win. I think it just kind of negates the potential for excitement a little more than I would hope in these kinds of environments.
Yeah, and like it's no wonder these organizations like want to switch up their roster all the time, and it's like, man, I doubt it's the rosters. Like if you just gave those rosters a little more experience, things may shake out differently. But what I would, not to say what could be, let's talk about what is. And I think one note to go back to the Golden Guardians Billy thing, and then we can kind of hop off. Is I mean that was your boy Licorice. I know, that's your guy from Cloud9.
Yes,
And
sir.
that game was pretty much the Licorice show, and to a certain degree, just a well played Yasuo comp. But overall, yeah, them getting that win was quite surprising, quite impressive. But yeah, then we had G2 moving on from the European region, and then on into the what is the bracket stage, and I'll name all of the teams that made it into the bracket stage. We've got Gen G, G2, Mad Lions, T1, Cloud9, BLG, JDG, and Golden Guardians. We've had the first 2 round 1 best of 5s.
And
We've had Gen G
thank
versus G2.
thank God for there being a losers bracket in this too. So
Right.
shout out to Riot for having that added in, even if the format, it's tough to find a perfect format. So I don't want to go too hard on my gripes with it, but I
Hmm.
appreciate the losers bracket big time.
Me too. Me too. So we've had Genji versus G2, and then Mad Lions versus T1 for those first 2 round 1 games, and then we'll have we'll have the other 2 coming up here. But we can talk about Genji versus G2 first off. That was a series. I I think my assessment was could likely go any score line, but Genji ultimately winning. I could have seen that going any of the ways. We ultimately get a 3-1 with the G2 victory coming in game 3, interestingly enough. So backs against the walls when they're able to pick up the dub. So I thought this series was fun and interesting. We saw some, I would say, very G2 picks come out from G2, but I think from a pick and ban perspective, the Draven priority for Hansama in this meta particularly is fascinating, and it gives this element of jeopardy to a bottom lane pick that like we had talked about previously, like you're not gonna have to deal with necessarily all of the time, but it came up big here in the Gen G series.
Yeah, and I mean that's the kind of weird thing about Han Sama is I mean in game one the rest of the team is struggling very hard, and he has a decent game on Draven. You see it get banned then immediately in games two, or so game two, and then he picks it again in game four. Or, so it's banned in game two and three, picks it again in game four. Um, it the pocket picks are it's important. It affects the draft and everything. It's just
Big time.
unfortunate that on the other roles for G2 that doesn't open up enough opportunities necessarily for them to be able to make up that gap to a team like Genji. Not that I expected it to, like you said. I expected any possible outcome other than Genji winning the series, but Han Sama, I mean, it definitely makes a difference. I am a little bit just disappointed with G2 as a whole. I feel like they just going through the picks and everything, I feel like they were not, and this is what I was saying about EU leading up to MSI. I felt like they were playing such a different meta than the rest of the world. Like
They
NA,
always
like
do.
whether you like it or not, NA was like mimicking pretty closely to China and Korea, who were
They
very
do a good
similar.
impression, yeah.
Europe was on a whole different page of the book. And I mean, I understand things like Darius is considered to be an okay counter to Fiora, or like that Viego can sometimes work in the right hands in this meta and whatnot. But overall, I mean, the best shot that they had was playing the Xayah Rakan, which has been pretty strong and heavily meta in these other regions for a while, and they didn't opt for that kind of strategy. I mean, I was talking about who was it? It was I think it might have been Billy Gaming with with Elk, and how I wanted him to be on the Xayah every single time if possible going through
Hmm.
the LPL playoffs. Like that's a strong pick, and for them to not really like hone in on some of those things, except for that one game, definitely a little bit frustrating. Because I think they have a lot of talented players, but if you're not picking champions that are gonna actually work, then it doesn't really matter.
Hmm. Yeah, and that was a part of the conversation that we were having during the game is like what makes you know a champion viable for competitive. But yeah, one of the interesting elements about the series of that I didn't expect was the Caps versus Chovy matchup. I figured Caps would have shown up a little better in that one versus one. And either it was the one versus one or Genji was just kind of able to exploit that matchup. I'm not sure, but you do get just I think it was first blood solo kill for Chovy on Caps in the early game in game one, and it's just like, man, that's a really rough way to start a series. And over the course of the series, I don't think Caps was really ever able to make the solid contributions that they would have needed to pull out multiple victories. The even the Annie for him in game three, like he wasn't necessarily the uh the thing that was winning them the engages or carrying them through. I think Yike had a lot of poppy plays that were really strong, and Broken Blade's Kennen ended up coming up big. But overall, I'm not sure Caps was the most relevant in this series, unfortunately. And I think that was going to be like one of their Mercedes keys to success is Caps logging into the server, honestly.
Yeah, and well, the other disappointing side of that is they didn't give him a champion that he is able to really win lane on. Like, I mean, you put him on Annie twice or Annie once, Lissandra. No, sorry, no, Annie twice, Lissandra once, and then Aurelion Sol.
Mm-hmm.
All very passive farming control mages that your goal is to like make something happen. Aurelion Sol, I love that they're breaking that out. That's a great wrinkle to bring in to change things up. Aurelion Sol, if your team can stay from everything that I've seen and like heard and read up on with the champion, if you can get that champion to late game, it is so difficult to lose
Mm-hmm.
because you have so much crowd control potential with the Q and how large that gets. You can the disruption that you have between that, the ultimate, like there are I mean even your passive like stars floating around you hitting things like starts to do stupid damage later in the game. Like if you can get it there, Aurelion Sol can be really really strong and difficult to beat. So I like them bringing that, but Caps is known for his strong outplay potential, for how mechanical he is as a mid laner and as a player, and you have him on these passive just point and click mid laners as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to even attempting an Ari, a LeBlanc. Like after game one and game two, especially, why not change up the strategy a little bit?
Sure.
Why put him back on the same passive mid laners that weren't successful in games one and two? You put him in the same position in game three, and like you said, it wasn't from Caps that they really won that. It was more from Yikes Poppy and the Kennen ultimates from Broken Blade, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to Caps coming in and getting a sweet pick with the Spirit Rush on Ari, hitting the charm, going, getting the orb, and diving back out. Like it wasn't that kind of play from Caps, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is where his strength is most evident in those strong like aggressive matchups.
Right. Dude, and even in that game three that they won, it was the like you had alluded to, they got the Zyrakan and they were able to exploit the relatively short ranged lane that Gen G drafted with the Zeri plus Sejuani. So they were able to like pretty well exploit that matchup. They were able to get the advantage there. So I think interestingly enough, G2 had avenues to victory, and I would sign up for a series where Caps was able, given some agency. To your point about the Annie, it felt like they pick the champion. It felt like they got this like 100% pick ban monstrosity. They got it. They're like, yeah, yeah. Now what do we do with it? Who wants it? It felt like that kind of pick banning for them. And in such a bot focused meta, I think this is where I was going with the Zyra Khan. In such a bot focused meta with the pick and ban, you end up making concessions elsewhere. So I would like to see improvements in the pick and ban strategy. I think most from G2 and maybe uh a what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say easier to execute comp, but I want to say easier to execute for G2 composition.
Yeah, just something that's more in their wheelhouse, something that's like
That's a
that.
good word.
Yeah, that's more suited to their play style, to what they've been playing. Like, I don't like. Hey, if you're gonna pick differently than the rest of the world, like for the extent of like the
Win some
split,
games.
or just like stick to it. Don't like
Sure.
create some weird
All right.
amalgamation of like your strategy and like China and LCK
Mm-hmm.
when you haven't been playing that way throughout the split. Like you gotta do what you know. It's like the same concept as it's better to have all five guys commit to a bad play than for
Mm-hmm.
one guy to commit to a good play and the other four to like stand by the side or not be on the same page. Like, if you're gonna make it to MSI playing different champion picks than the standards and whatnot and everything, don't like default to what other people are playing. Like, stay in your lane to some extent, and like, it's better to play your style the best than to play someone else's style worse than them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we've seen from North America going to Worlds. Like we said, they kind of mimic the LPL and LCK oftentimes in the comps, the strategies, and whatnot.
They're the pink Mercedes.
Yeah, the Pink Mercedes had no shot at winning the Constructors Championship, but it beat a lot of teams that like weren't copying someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, like, potential to win it all, not really there. But on the other side, yeah, like, you are playing the best strategy, just worse than the better teams are playing the best strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best you can do sometimes.
Yeah. So now G2 drop down into the losers bracket. Hopefully they can improve on some of these fumbles in their first round one series here. So yeah, not the end for G2 here, but a strong performance from Gen G, I think. We're saying a lot about what went wrong for G2, but obviously Gen G was playing great on the other side. I love seeing Chovy on the Ari. I think Pays and Delight just seem to continue getting better as they get more games in. They are becoming a dominant force in the bottom lane. So yeah, I think Genji like just getting started, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, they're kind of one of the teams that we're expecting to be making it to that finals. I think between them, T1, and JDG, those are the three teams that we should be expecting to be vying for those
Mm.
final positions and everything as we go through this stage and all.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Genji's a really good team. Like we said at the start, we didn't necessarily expect G2 to win by any sense of the word, but we did expect them to kind of play out their strategy maybe a little bit better, or try to really work in their own wheelhouse a little bit more than doing things
Mm-hmm.
like putting caps on mostly immobile control mages for the start of that series at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so tough one there. But the second round one series that we had was T1 versus Mad Lions. And we could call this episode Aaron's favorites because we get to start the series off with another one of his favorites is the Kazakhs jungle there from Owner on T1, and an impressive scoreline, if I might add. Uh, one could say that Owner kind of carried that game to a certain degree. We see T1 going for the very flavor of the tournament, mid lane Nautilus. I guess it's the belief that crowd control anywhere is good crowd control. Who gives a shit about a laning phase? And
Yep.
with the utility of that alt and the amount of crowd control that a Nautilus can lay down, I mean, it's kind of interesting gameplay.
Yeah, and the Nautilus is something that we started to see crop up a little bit more. I was seeing things about it being broken out in scrims, and then of course I think we saw it a little bit in the play-in stage as well.
Yep.
So I'm not surprised that T1. I think they have to some extent realized that in certain metas, putting Faker on a really strong utility mid laner is just the optimal way to go. Similarly, looking at game 2, having him on the mid lane Cassante, you're allowing your other lanes to carry the games more. Not that Faker can't or couldn't, but if your optimal strategy is to play based on like your lineup is to play through the bot lane, which T1 really, the bot lane should be one of their prime win conditions to get ahead and everything. Yeah, Faker can play whatever. Put him on whatever. He won't lose lane. He'll come in and do his thing. Like, that's a guarantee. The younger guys, Guma, Kyria, like having them on strong picks that they're comfortable with and that they can stomp with is going to be a much better strategy than putting them on semi optimal champions and having Faker on the carry. Like it you said it, it's a bot lane focused kind of win condition at the moment in the meta. So yeah, put Faker on that Nautilus, put him on whatever it is that that gives them that crowd control and that ability for the other lanes to carry. But then even in game 3, he's on the Ari again. Like he's able, he has that flexibility. He's played every champion a million times and like can just go and do his thing. So I like seeing him on the Nautilus. I think that's a good strategy for T1. But yeah, the Kazakhs, I'm always happy to see it come back into professional play.
Yeah, it's interesting when something breaks on the champion because then it comes back for a little bit. And one of the casters said every single one of his abilities has been broken at one point in his like development cycle where, you know, at one point it was the Q, at one point it was like the W, like the range or like the health it gave back, the E
I
with
couldn't
like
tell
all the
you like
resets.
yeah, I couldn't tell you exactly like when these things happened, but like I mean the ability to use your W while jumping early on with
That's what it
him,
was, yeah.
being the ultimate. I mean, I climbed to gold for the first time because of Kazakhs. His ultimate, before people realized, it used to give you not just invisibility, which was way longer than what it is now, but also with the ultimate, it gave you like 40% damage reduction while you were invisible or something stupid like that in like season 4. And like the Q isolation damage was broken at one point. The resets on the hop, the ultimate, like everything has been broken. It seems like it's actually in a decent spot now though,
Sure.
where it's where nothing's too bad on the champion, or nothing's too busted that it's gonna be like a Kassadin pick ban every time.
Right. But yeah, I think one thing you could say about the T1 drafts is they're very interesting. They come in with what seem to be like very precise and exact plans for like their top side of the map, and then just like look to battle for, you know, important bottom lane champs. Like they're prepared to do that in every game. And then the most interesting game to me was game 3 where they pick the Scion, do a small double jungle and then just 4-man dive bot using the zombie scion to tank the turret and get a double kill, and it was brutal. We've seen it in other regions crop up, and it was funny to hear Gumayusi in the interview afterward just be like, yeah, we saw it, we know it works, we just wanted to give it a try here, so we did it. And literally they executed it like fucking perfectly, by the way. Like, it was clean as fuck, actually. Um, and that just ended the game. Like, it was just insurmountable for their fucking Ezreal Annie bottom lane. Dude,
Oh, you mean Ezreal and Annie got behind and didn't scale well?
oh no. Yeah, that was
Color
just
me
like lights out.
surprised.
Dude, it was lights out. They like took control of like their like blue side red buff jungle, and then just like pushed down for the kills, and then that was just GG. So it was super clean in that regard. But yeah, I don't even I dude, I need to see some more games for Mad Lions to be like, did they, oh man, they're just gone in a whisper.
Yeah, I
Came and
mean,
went.
definitely disappointing. I think we'll have, fortunately, a better losers bracket series, but
Rematch.
the disappointing thing with like the stage 2 bracket draw, which I saw a lot of ways that this could have been improved upon, but not allowing the same regions to be in the same sides of the bracket.
Sure,
I
yeah.
mean, you have Korea matchup in round 2. You have EU matchup in the losers bracket. Unless Cloud9 or, well, I guess Cloud9 beating Billy Gaming would be the less likely upset
That'd be crazy.
between Golden Guardians and JDG.
Dude.
We very easily could have NA versus NA, EU versus EU in the losers bracket, and then Korea and China in the upper bracket. Like, that's kind of disappointing a little bit.
Yeah, it would be, just in the sense that you would just end up seeing like the finals from the home region just again. But dude, I wouldn't set your sights too high for Cloud9, man. Remember, we have Blabber on an international stage. Like,
Hey man, those
he's
scuttles aren't gonna scuttle
dude.
themselves.
He is like the worst at like just
No.
classic, just stage nerve moves. Like, none of that shit really happens to other players, but
Oh,
Blabber is rife for them.
but he's like also one of the best junglers that North America's ever had. It's crazy that he has those moments.
know.
It blows my
know.
mind.
I know, but you gotta factor it in because it's
But
happened enough now where you're like, yeah,
hey,
but he
but
chokes hard.
Golden Guardians
My
only
man's
took
got
one.
shaky hands, dude.
Golden Guardians only took one game off of C9 in the LCS finals. They took a game off Billy Gaming. So
Transitive property.
that means that Billy Gaming and Cloud9 are at least on an even playing field.
Currently, yes. I see that works.
Yeah. Currently, yes, because it's 0-0 in that series
Right.
at the moment.
Currently, it's 0-0.
It's currently 0-0. But yeah, a lot of good MSI to continue to watch. I have to catch up a little bit on some of the series and be ready for this next round, but I am looking forward to it. It's everything that I've gotten to watch thus far has been a blast. I love seeing international tournaments. Like you said, I wish that they would let another tournament organizer. Like, I love things like IEM San Jose, where you've got TSM versus Unicorns of Love and like all these other random teams being thrown in. That was always fun. So hopefully at some point we can get a little bit more intermingled international play. But for now, we've got a lot of good MSI to continue to watch.
Yeah, a bunch of good matches still like in the upper bracket, and then we'll have the losers bracket teams kind of sprinkling in there. Obviously, double elimination, one loss isn't out, but not a good start for the European contestants. But yeah, we'll continue our coverage of MSI in the following weeks. I just want to just sprinkle on a little bit of cardboard here to the conversation. So I played an old commander deck that's taken me like the longest to put together. It's funny. It's kind of like my my undershirt that I like nobody else has ever seen because white has never been the most interesting color, but in the like I want to have a deck that's every like one of each monocolor, one of each you get
Right.
it.
Yeah.
You have to have a monocolor one, and for so long it was just garbage.
Yeah,
It
those
just
damn
bad.
whites just suck.
The damn just no, the white cards,
Oh
dude.
yeah,
Don't
sorry. Sorry,
the
sorry.
white cards. And so for so long, I never wanted to play it. Just slowly able to slot in good cards here and
Okay.
there, just few and far between. But finally, I pulled with March of the Machine. I pulled the a copy of Elish Norn, the new printing. That's like super strong. Seems like a good commander.
Hmm.
So I took out this old commander. I said, "Get out of here, you sloppy jalopy!" And I put the new one in. I got 2 games in it on Monday. I think a little bit of new deck woes happened, made some misplays, made some miscalculations, all to be expected, all fine. Was able to kind of work through, like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, yep, I understand what happened. So I don't think mistakes I'll make again, but overall, I think it was a better experience than I had ever guessed previously, like playing a mono white deck. And I guess it's because I had taken so long to make sure like there's actually good cards in there and blah blah blah. But it was a pleasant gaming experience, and I would do it again.
Nice. Well, I feel like the monocolored decks are always going, or not, maybe not always, but for most of them are going to be a bit more difficult to build to an acceptable power level. Because you either have to go and specifically kind of collect cards of that nature, whether like lands and different things like that, where there's just, I mean, the more colors a deck is, the more options you have to
Right.
dial stronger powered cards in. Like, yeah, mono decks there, I'm sure there are some that are like very powerful and that you have a lot of good stuff that's right there available, but I would imagine sometimes it can be difficult to put a deck together that has the power level, especially for something like Commander, where you only are able to have one of each card
Mm-hmm.
individually in a deck. You can't stack on some of the more strong cards that might work well in a different format. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly what you're hitting on. It's hard to get the redundancy in the strong effects that you want. You have to spread it out over a bunch of different cards as opposed to just getting, 2 play sets of these cards that say, draw 10 on them or whatever.
Yeah.
That would be super powerful.
No, but
But,
I get what you mean. Like, it's
right.
when you have like the best cards of red and the best cards of blue for a red blue deck that you can turn into
It's
a
easier to
commander.
fill up
Like,
slots.
yeah, then to be like, oh well, these are your strategies are narrowed the less color combination you have.
You got it. So you got to be a little more flexible, a little more creative. But yeah, overall, I had a blast. I think games 1 and 3, I actually had a real chance of winning. If I had like made different decisions at some of the important parts, and then in game 3, like remember my plan when I was like tapping my mana. So just like simple mistakes, but overall, I think it was fun. But yeah, just a couple of Magic games here this week. But Aaron, let's get these people out of here. Give us your flavor of the week here, sir.
Sounds good. I'll run through it pretty quickly. My food for this week, there's a truffle flatbread pizza that Colleen, truffle flatbread pizza that Colleen and I get from Trader Joe's. I ate that all by myself on Monday because Colleen was out of town for a work trip. But it was just a solid, easy meal that I was able to throw in the oven. It was nice to have something simple when I had the puppy to take care of on my own, since she can be her own handful. For my music, Lil Wayne was popping up a little bit on a couple of my playlists and all.
Respect.
And I, while we were at the wedding, I don't remember what brought it on, but I got excited enough about Lil Wayne and how I wanted to tell Colleen how I think he's easily a top 10 rapper of all time and one of the best lyricists in rap, that I set a reminder with Siri on my phone for the next day to make sure that I told her when she could hear me instead of with all the music and whatnot. I was very amped on it. And then for my visual medium, I went back to Black Clover, one of anime's heroic kind of character arc anime that I had been watching. I'm pretty sure the reason that I had stopped previously is the reason that I normally stop animes before I get to the end of them, which is the dubbed versions run out and I have to read. So I think so that I saw that they had released more of the dubbed versions past where I had been. So I get to just watch my TV and listen to the character as opposed to having to read like I'm doing a book report to watch TV. So, and anyone who wants to shit on me in the comments on YouTube or anything, like, go for it. When I'm watching TV, my brain goes off in terms of like any sort of like thinking capacity. I just want to watch and enjoy, and like having to read is less enjoyable for me.
Sure.
That's all I got to say about it, but that's my flavor of the week. I'll let you wrap it up here. What's been going on? What have you been having over that way for your week?
Well, just to tag on to your Lil Wayne, I still think the No Ceilings mixtape was one of like my formative like hip hop things. That's probably like in one of my core memories of hip hop is the No Ceilings mixtape.
I believe
Fucking it. So many good tracks on that. So yeah, Lil Wayne. You know what? Lil Wayne is my music for this week.
Hell yeah!
Just remembering the track list for No Ceilings is just like, yeah, you're right. You know, this guy is pretty solid.
Yeah,
so Lil Wayne is my music for this week as well. My food here for the week is fondly remembering the chocolatey filled bit at the bottom of a waffle cone that you get. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like of a drumstick or any of those things.
You got it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got it. That chocolatey little bit right at the end.
Best parts.
There's a layer of that in this brand of gelato that me and Sarah enjoy, and so we were just kind of
Is it at the bottom?
No, it's like in the middle.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Because I've seen
there's even better stuff at the bottom. It's crazy gelato, dude.
Sounds delicious.
It's crazy. So yeah, just like it's literally giving me like beach memories as I'm eating it. It's like that. It's that good. So that's my food here for the week. And then my visual medium. Me and Sarah finished. As you know, we finished Avatar: The Last Airbender. We are now on to The Legend of Korra. We just finished up seasons 1 and 2.
Should I check it out?
I think it's worth it. It's a little more action oriented than the original, but it still has like all of the elements that you love from the original.
Nice.
Great characters, great dialogue, great voice actors. They have The guy from the Progressive commercials, the one that's in Whiplash. You know who I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, I don't know his name.
He deserves for us to know his name. He's so good, but he voices one of the main characters, and it's awesome. It's
Yeah.
awesome. So yeah, I definitely think it's worth a watch. We're looking forward to season 3 and 4. So hopefully that'll be my visual mediums here to talk about very shortly. But that is my flavor of the week, sir.
Awesome. I love to hear it. Should I rewatch The Last Airbender before diving into Korra, or don't
You
need to?
don't you don't have to. It's like
Okay,
a whole other thing. You'll get
cool.
what you need of Aang from the Korra show.
Okay,
It'll give you great reminders and then show you all like the new stuff that you need. It's great.
awesome. Sounds good to me. But as always, ladies and gents, the flavor of the week brings us to the end of the episode. As always, thank you so much for listening, joining us. Make sure to let us know what your flavor of the week is. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, all those things. Twitter at tall and short of one, the number one. You can find us on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to listen with us.
Yeah, we just appreciate you so much for taking the time out to take a listen to the pod. And we just love you so much and thank you so much. And tell your friends what we talk about with race cars and video games and stuff. And just we'll see you next week. This is the tall and short of it. Peace out, everyone.
Catch you later, guys.